a little bit at loss for words, but it's a relief in some ways for at least what I'm feeling, and I think slightly more hopeful than yesterday. And I don't know if anybody wants to share their feelings or thoughts before we actually get started. We'll open the floors.
I'm just breathing. That's, I think that's, I kind of been walking around like this.
You think maybe it really is an inflection point? Like some people are describing it, this is the watershed moment where things start to change.
I think it's a small one.
It's a small one. I'm hopeful.
It's a small one. And I think the TEP Center should alleviate some more of that. That's what we're hoping for.
We're hoping.
Yeah, it brought tears to my eyes. Yes, it is.
Okay, let me get us started. Okay. So welcome everyone to our second meeting of our second book club on The Yellow House by Sarah Broom. I know that this little passage that we have is in the second half of the book, but I think now more than ever, after reading the first half of the book and living here for 10 years or more, the mythology of New Orleans, that it is always a place for a good time, and that its citizens are the happiest people alive, willing to smile, dance, cook, and entertain for you, that it is a progressive city open to whimsy and change, can sometimes suffocate the people who live and suffer under the place's burden, burying them under layers and layers of signifiers, making it impossible to truly get at what is dysfunctional about the city. Where you can buy the book. You can buy this book anywhere you would like, but we hope that you can consider a local bookseller, and for that matter, a Black-owned local bookseller. We're partnering with Vera Williams at the Community Book Center on Bayou Road. She has copies. You can also order through bookshop.org and find her page. So if you order through bookshop.org, portion of the profits go back to Community Book Center. And you can also find them on Bayou Road if you are in town. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my mouse. Our moderators today are myself, Michael Grody. I am Director of Building Programs at Alembic Community Development. I'm an NOAF board member, and I had to become treasurer last fall. So I'm learning how to balance a checkbook for the first time in my life.
I believe the term is voluntold, right?
Yeah. I'm a real estate developer and a registered architect, husband and dad to baby Luce. You met her just a few minutes ago, and I have caught one fish this year. So I'm off the skunk board. Melissa, how you doing?
I'm breathing and I'm here.
You want me to keep hanging, handling this?
Well, go for it. Yes.
It's up to you. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to say good evening to everyone, and it's such a pleasure to be here today, and particularly on this day. And yes, I'm co-moderator with Mike on this epic book club journey, which I'm so excited for. I'm the director of planning and community engagement for Concordia. We're a local boutique firm based in New Orleans. And I'm also a NOFA board member. I consider myself a community organizer, a social alchemist, and a reformed public servant, _highlight. So, yes. And we are joined by our esteemed board, Sarah being one of them. You want to go to the next slide? Mm-hmm. And do we have our chair with us tonight?
We don't. He just said that he had to make a last minute trip to Seattle. I believe where his parents are. So he's unable to join us tonight. I do believe Paula Peer is on.
I am. I'm here. I'm sorry if I'm being antisocial. I've been pushed off into the bedroom, and so I don't have a very professional place to sit to watch, but I'm tuned in and excited.
Thanks, Paula. And Sarah Bush is also on the board. Oh, I guess you already. And then Shelby Russ, Wes Michaels, and Beth Jacob are also board members pictured here. George Costanza is not a board member, but he is our.
Wish he was.
Yeah. He's a stand-in for new board members, which I do believe this year we are going to start to recruit new board members. If you have thoughts, if you have ideas, if you would like to become a board member, we would love to have you. We have exciting things coming up, which I hope to talk about at the end of today's conversation if we have some time. But I don't want to spend too much time on that stuff because there's a lot to talk about, and I think there's a lot of feelings floating around, and we can get to those exciting things maybe the next time we meet if there's time. If there's not time today. This is our critique of our mission, and we talked to for those of you that have been on our book clubs before. Our original mission is in red. Our critique is in white. This was written in the days following the murder of George Floyd last summer. It is poignant to look at it again today. Excuse me. Yeah, you can find this on our website, noaf.org. I urge you to read through it. So following that, we worked to sort of rethink about what kind of organization we wanted to be and what it exactly we wanted to do as an organization in New Orleans, amongst many other great organizations doing similar work and similar things. It was a matter of sustainability as much as it was a matter of relevancy. And this is where we are currently. The stories of our cities, of our communities, and of the people who make our city need to be celebrated, amplified, and documented. Not only will they be seen and heard, but they will enrich, they will empower, they will challenge, and most of all, they will inspire. New Orleans Architecture Foundation, building a more complete story of New Orleans. And so our programming will begin to really change and really begin to represent our city in a much different way than it has in the past. And now, no sort of like looking back in the past beyond our critique, it's looking forward. And we have really am excited about the kind of future of this organization. Melissa, do you want to?
Sure.
Okay.
And for some of you, this is old hat, but our expectation in this space is that we learn, grow, and be brutally honest. And to be able to do that, we have developed a set of community expectations. We want this space to be a learning environment, right? We are navigating how power is configured, identity is lived, and oppression, and conversely, privilege is experienced. So as such, we agree to the following, right? Recognition, right? Recognition of systematic and structural racism and how that's fundamentally shaped our nation. So we're going to rely on the narratives from the Yellow House to really broaden our comprehension and discussion tonight. We're going to acknowledge that even though race is a social construct, it still has real world implications. So we're going to be explicit about race and racism, and no coded language is appreciated. And so if it does occur, we will point that out politely, and we will listen deeply. We'll be mindful, we'll be kind, and we'll be open ourselves up to be vulnerable. And that helps us listen intently, to move through discomfort, and we'll speak twice after another person has spoken first. We'll recognize intersectionality, right? So that gives us the space to reflect how we've all been affected by structural and systemic racism, and how moving forward, what is required of us. And then we're going to ask, unabashedly, we're going to ask when we're unsure of a word, an issue, or a dilemma. And we are going to allow people to learn what we already know. And then we're going to respect confidentiality. We're going to take the stories, but we're going to leave the names. So that's a great point for us to just quickly introduce ourselves, your name, and just to say that you agree with the set of expectations. And if there's anything that you need to add, please feel free to do so.
I'll call on everybody. I'll go first. I said I agree. I'm Michael Grody. You know who I am. Lydia Charles.
I agree, and I work with Leona and Tremaine with the Leona Tate Foundation, and Kathleen.
Kim Haskell.
Hi, I'm Kim. I'm in Calgary, Canada, but I have a deep affinity for the New Orleans people. And I work in heritage planning and food security planning.
Kathleen.
I'm Kathleen Payadu, and I agree. I am also a board member of the Leona Tate Foundation for Change.
Leona.
I'm Leona Tate, and I agree.
Sarah Ash.
Sarah Ash. I'm in Middlebury, Vermont, but I lived in New Orleans probably about 10 years, maybe 10 years ago. I can't remember. Anyway, I agree very much so. And I come out of tremendous white privilege and have tremendous amount to continue to learn.
And I'm Tom Dunn. I lived in New Orleans for 35 years, raised 3 children who are still working in New Orleans, or almost still there. One's leaving. I agree, and I'm working on reparations in a committee in here in Vermont.
Melissa, Tremaine.
I'm Tremaine Knight Riley. I definitely agree to the code of culture for our call. I work with the Leona Tate Foundation.
Sarah Bush.
Hi, I'm Sarah Bush. I am Vice President of Operations for Landis Construction here in New Orleans, and also a NOAF board member. I agree to the code of conduct sounds incredibly wrong. Melissa, remind me your beautifully eloquent way of saying.
Community expectations.
That didn't sound too hard to remember, but community expectations, I absolutely agree. And I'm looking very much forward to hearing everyone's thoughts tonight.
Stephen, welcome back.
Hello again. Stephen Joseph, live in Guerrero. I agree to the terms, and I apologize in advance. I will be ducking out a little early this evening.
Paula Pierre.
Hey, sorry again that I'm being antisocial without a video, but member of the NOAF, co-founder of actually on the board, and local architect, involved in a few efforts for diversity inclusion, and I had started reading The Yellow House about, I don't know, a year ago, and really enjoyed it. So I'm looking forward to having good conversations about the depth of meaning and kind of, I think that quote that you just brought up, Mike, was really kind of hit the nail on the head about kind of our wonderful city with all of its kind of dysfunctional issues. How do we unfold that and help, just kind of understand what those complexities are and really get to the heart of things.
Great. Ruth. You're muted, Mom. And I can't unmute you. Someone on the iPhone? I don't know who iPhone is.
Hi.
Oh, hey, that's my sister.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shannon Davis, and I'm Mike's sister, but I'm also an educator, and I live in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and I'm very much in agreement with the group norms and expectations, and I'm excited to listen and learn, and thank you again for inviting me.
Thanks, Shannon. Ruth?
Sorry, I didn't mean to unmute, to keep muted. I'm a retired reading specialist, now a nanny, and I completely agree to the terms. I think they're wonderful. Thank you very much, Melissa, for establishing them.
Great. That's everybody. Let me get back to our presentation. So just to kind of remind everybody, we are partnering on this book club and hopefully a whole lot more with the iconoclast, Leona Tate, and the team from the Leona Tate Foundation for Change, and everybody working on the TEP Center. That would be Lydia Charles on the call, Tremaine Knight and Riley on the call, and Kathleen, the new board member. I'm sorry, Kathleen, I don't remember your last name. And we're really excited to kind of continue this conversation. We had a quick call last night with the team to sort of discuss what we would talk about. And it quickly, came to the realization that there was just so much to talk about. And so these are the topics we're going to try and cover. Feel free to bring up other ones that you thought were really important, poignant, challenging, whatnot in your reading of the book, or the first half of the book. And please make this as much of a discussion as you would like, and not a one-way conversation. So what I'm gonna do, I forgot. I have a couple more slides. So this is John McDonough as a young man who was from Baltimore, was hired to sort of secure some vessels and their cargo from England on their way to New Orleans. He did that twice, decided he really liked New Orleans and made New Orleans his home. Became a planter, became a slave owner, became one of the richest men in the city, probably the richest man in the city at a time, at a time when New Orleans was one of the richest cities in the world. And so we're probably talking Jeff Bezos type sort of wealth in the context of the middle 1800s in New Orleans and the American South. This is Baroness Pontabla. She was the niece of the governor, or the daughter of the governor of the state. And Pontabla is a name for New Orleanians. You may sound familiar. These buildings are called the Pontabla Building, which kind of align Jackson Square, Place d'Armes. and she developed these. And John McDonough thought that this lady would be perfect for his wife. And she swiped left. She said no. And after many attempts to court. And John McDonough died alone, without any heirs, and to all accounts, kind of a miserly, miserable sort of soul. McDonough also educated a few of his slaves, but to that end, that education was to get them to Liberia. He was not for integration, and he was not for equality. He was not for any of these things. Upon his death, he bequeathed his estate, which is between 1.5 million and 2 million at those times, which is probably around 45, 50 million in today's terms, to the school children of New Orleans and Baltimore. And they both cities sort of spent their money very, very differently. That was for both Black and white students. But if you know, at the time in 1850, the schools would have been segregated if there were Black schools. And so we're going to talk about both cities because I have some interesting information from both places. New Orleans built anywhere between 30 and 40 schools with the name McDonough, and the McDonough Fund funded schools, bought land, did many things. And so all of the schools were named after him. In Baltimore, one school was built, John McDonough School. It started out as a military school. It was first integrated in 1959, and it's still around today. And one of the things that we're going to talk about, this is McDonough 19. This is the school that Leona Tate, Tessie Prevost, and Gail Etienne integrated in 1960. This building was built in 1929, when that fund was given to the schools in 1850. So you can just imagine how broad and kind of the trajectory of the school district's money went that far into the future. This is money earned on the backs of slaves to buy this land to keep Black students out of. So I'm gonna stop this screen share for a second and move to a different I'm gonna move to a different page here. Sorry about this. Okay. That's the wrong one. Okay, so this image here, everybody can see this. This is an image of John McDonough Day in 1930, in the 30s. This is at Lafayette Square, which is in the CBD, where the John McDonough statue was placed. And I just want to show you, so this is the website of that school in Baltimore. It is a bit of a khakis and blazers type school. And these children are all standing around this monument of John McDonough. So when John McDonough died, his will said that he wanted to be celebrated on John McDonough, on his birthday, or I think it was his birthday. But there's also this thing, and this is put on the website. This is his rules for living. And if you walk through this list and add said by slave owning John McDonough, I think it really helps frame this this man's sort of legacy, especially ones like "Do unto men as you would be done by," and the one about labor is the one that sort of kills me. Something about labor is the remember that always that labor is the conditions of our existence. It's hard to swallow. And so there was definitely this sort of aspect of this ego that this man wanted to somehow have some kind of legacy. And so here's another image from 1937 of John McDonough Day. And John McDonough Day is May 7th. May is already starting to be a warm, the weather's starting to get warm. And to think about having to come out as a student, especially as a Black student, and plant flowers and pay tribute to someone was pretty, I think, it's a pretty just awful thing to do. So I'm going to kind of swing back. We're going to come back to some of these other items, but I want to get back to Leona. And Leona, if you can you talk about your first memory of McDonough Day?
I think it was third or fourth grade. I had begun to understand that the color of my skin had made a big difference, but really didn't understand McDonough Day. But it was a field trip. And to go on this field trip, you had to pass your grade or have a good grade to go. So I was accepted to go on the field trip from school, and I can remember we all wore white. We were told to wear white. We had to wear white. And I got off the school bus, and I knew then I just felt that, hey, I was out of place. I was out of place because everybody was white. And when I said it was a lot of students from different schools, it was just all over with a big mountain of flowers around his bus. And I remember seeing Philip Baptiste, which is a Black man that worked at City Hall, but I didn't know him. But I know him now, but I don't know, our eyes caught contact. So that made me feel a little bit comfortable, you know. But everybody, so many people in my class got keys to the city for making a certain grade. And I know I had done it, but I didn't get a key to the city. So it wasn't a big thing. But I can remember my dad really didn't want me to go on that field trip, but I thinking it was a fun field trip for me to go on. So my mama let me go, you know, she just let me go. So, but I knew I was really uncomfortable. I shouldn't have been on that field trip, but I made it through the day. Mm-hmm. I made it through the day.
Mm-hmm. And on page 30 of the, Mike, you're muted.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to, Sarah Bush asked if there's a significance to the white dresses.
Probably because he was dead, and you know that was a color you wore when somebody had passed away, either white or Black. But I know children wouldn't wear Black, so I'm thinking that's why we wore white.
And on page 30 of our book, the children wore white on special occasions for picture taking, church services at the Divine Mission of God on Sundays, and then every May for John McDonough Day. We were told how the Black students must wait in the heat on that day that celebrates John McDonough, while the white students paid tribute to him first.
That's probably right. It was hot. I do remember that. Mm-hmm. But we were at City Hall. I do remember that. Mm-hmm.
I keep muting myself and forgetting. a few years before before you guys went into McDonough 19, Leona, there was the McDonough Day boycott, and there was finally a sort of a backlash to to this kind of preposterous sort of honoring of this man, and it really sort of came up in the kind of energy of all of the lawsuits that were sort of mounting, and that would eventually become the 5 lawsuits that would become Brown versus Board of Education. And in some ways, this is one of the first large-scale protests in the city of New Orleans in the kind of civil rights era. As Leona said, that everybody would get keys to the right. All the students would get a key to the city. No one knew that this was going to happen. The mayor didn't know, and this was Shep Morrison, I believe. And so everyone boycotted, or Black families boycotted this event, and Morrison was sort of left really embarrassed and really upset. Had some, thousands of keys to the city that he couldn't give away. Really, this was a sort of another sort of turning point or inflection point in the city, and its civil rights story. So fast forward to what happened today and the events that led to today. And this is from June 15th, which was about 2 weeks after George Floyd's murder.
After some demonstrators removed a statue of John McDonough from Duncan Plaza and reportedly threw it into the Mississippi River. It's no longer in the river. This weekend, a group of men removed it from there. But as Mayor Cantrell tells Real One Belogan, it's unclear where it is right now.
God Bless America plays in the background from the Natch Steamboat as a bystander records a group of men Sunday pulling the bust of John McDonough out of the Mississippi River. A group of people tore down the statue Saturday and dumped it into the river. 2 people face several charges for their alleged role in the removal of the statue in Duncan Plaza.
The city of New Orleans will not tolerate vandalism or destruction of public and private property. And should that happen, we will ensure arrests are made and people are held accountable.
Walter Stern, history assistant professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and a New Orleans native, says McDonough leaves behind a mixed legacy.
John McDonough was a slaveholder who acquired his wealth largely through being a slave owner, a plantation owner, and upon his death, he left a significant amount of money for the education of white as well as Black children, both in New Orleans and in his native Baltimore.
Money McDonough left behind built a number of schools across New Orleans. For decades, they bore his name. Only a few remain.
One of the things that McDonough said in his will was that he gave this money and he asked that every year children would come and leave flowers on his grave. One way that was honored was that annually there was a McDonough Day in the spring.
Stern says children honored McDonough in different ways depending on their race. During Jim Crow, he says white children went first while Black children followed. He says the way protesters brought down the bust will have its own impact.
And these symbols really matter, and taking down a statue isn't going to eliminate systemic racism, but it sends the message of just how dramatically we need to rethink how we structure society.
In New Orleans, Roman Belogan, Fox 8, Local First.
Well, if the city gets a bus back, it's still unclear if the city will put it back up or move it somewhere else.
someone's back. And then let me see. Oh, just some wild stuff. This is Founders Day at the school in Baltimore, and they have a song.
Mike, you need to share your screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm fighting a toddler here. So this is Founders Day, a song for John McDonough. And so I just, I want to kind of compare the two places, and the reverence for him and the complication of what his legacy is. And I think those are all the things that I wanted to share. I'm going to post all of this stuff up so everybody can kind of look at these. I'll put this up in the chat. So with that, we can discuss a little bit more.
Miss Leona, was that your one and only John McDonough Day?
I don't think so. I think I was I think I went again, but I was not as afraid anymore. I remembered the song like just now when you shared it. I kind of do remember it. I don't remember the words, but I remember that melody.
So you had to sing that also?
I don't know if I sung it, but I remember it. I remember it. I might have, but I think I had gone another time. Yeah, but I don't think my mama dressed me in white. I remember wearing a suit. Mm-hmm.
So I think that this is I hope a really kind of clear, illuminating example of how white supremacy kind of forgives and excuses the sort of the terrible sort of crime of slavery, and then Jim Crow and mass incarceration, and we can go down the list to where we are today, through the deification of these folks who in one way, and in one way society has sort of like said, oh, well, he did such a good thing by helping fund all of our schools. We shouldn't look over there. And I think that this is a central issue for our cities, especially our southern cities, to grapple with. And you've seen this on the news for the last few years, especially in this city. And I just kind of want to point that out.
Mike, can I say something? Because you said something earlier that I wanted to kind of link to what you just said. That this money was given and the school was built, McDonough 19, to keep Black students out. So who has the money? Who's supporting the schools? I mean, if John McDonough was told that the schools were going to be integrated, do you think these schools would have been integrated? No. So it's really interesting how it plays out. I mean, yes, he wanted to be honored, but in honoring his wish to have these schools segregated and built and kept them segregated, that's also part of how he was honored. He would not have given the money if that was not possible.
When did the critical mass of questioning this start to happen? That like this was kind of really a sick idea. Would it be after Brown versus
Well, McDonough Day, the boycott, the protest that Mike posted, that was May 7th, 1954. Brown v. Board is May 17th, 1954. And the fact that Leona had to attend them in her school in 3rd grade and she integrated in 1960, I don't know when it ended, but I mean, that showed the timeline where it continued for.
So I mean, in the critical mass of the population, when did they start to unpack? This is really messed up to be supporting this ideology.
I think we're in the midst of it.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I probably shouldn't. I mean, I've only been here 10 years since Katrina on the coast in here, but I think this is, it also depends on which community you're asking, right?
And I think in New Orleans, they're widely accepted. Well, not just New Orleans, I'd say these United States, they're widely accepted and institutionalized rituals and holidays and that are at the exclusion and the erasure of certain people. And it's only codified by symbolism, right? By statues. And all of these are deemed more important, right, than our collective whole. And the equity and wellness of our collective whole. And so when we think about the role of symbolism and ritual and how that bonds people and excludes people, right? What is the cost of all of that? And I think cost is what we're grappling with.
I definitely think that was a very important point you had, like the way they're using symbols, and because for those who don't know, it's previous discussions. I grew up in Old Metairie, so I said last year when this statue goes up, this is what social media friends, parents, and these kinds of things that I'm sitting there like arguing these points that you feel like this is what you're still, and some friends anyway. One friend's parent in particular was just kept talking about how pretty John McDonough Day was, and why is it, it's like, what's wrong with it? And that I was, Melissa, when you mentioned like the attaching on to all the symbols and the decorative side of it without really wanting to look even, it's that it's not like it takes a very deep dive before you should kind of hit, oh, there's the problem. It doesn't take that much digging to hit that, but like I said, but like Mike said, it's definitely some of it still like I still don't understand. You just kind of hit your head against the rock a little bit.
There's an article that I was trying to find from, I don't know if it's one of the local news stations or a local paper, and it was written by, I mean, it's sort of one of those community columnists kind of things, not really a reporter. But it talks about Jefferson Parish's McDonough Day and how McDonough Day is one of the oldest celebrations in Jefferson Parish. And the article, I did a command F and searched for slaveholder, slave, any of those, words. They didn't come up. They didn't describe McDonough in any other way than a philanthropist who benefit and how this benefited the region, and this was written in 2018, and so there is a continued myopic view of how power works in this country and in this city, in this region, and it was, I guess it wasn't shocking, but it was just sort of it was kind of frustrating to read.
Hey, Mike, I just asked my husband who grew up here. I'm from somewhere else. And he said he went to McDonough Day at his school at the cemetery in 1977. So he was in 5th grade when he got out of, I guess, the school that did that. But anyway.
Any other thoughts or comments about McDonough Day?
Not so much about McDonough Day, but even just thinking about, on the West Bank, Gretna, McDonoughville, which is where my dad grew up, and he's very proud of his McDonoughville heritage, and McDonoughville is primarily Black people, and he went to McDonough 26, and I don't think he ever really thought about it. that was an issue.
There is the alumni of 35
Yeah.
Do not want that name changed.
Right.
And so it is, these names are complicated. We talked a little bit last time we met about how Leona, Gail, and Tessie were given the moniker of McDonough 3, and that still kind of lives today. We're trying. At least I don't like using the term, and so this will continue. But these are things that we have to confront as a society in order to sort of make them change. It's what has to happen. And so to segue, I think that the schools, the integration of schools, the development of the suburbs throughout the mid-century, even here, and the book so well kind of tells that story of the evolution of the East, the economic kind of forces of NASA, of oil and gas, really starting to make the East and the New Orleans East Inc. a viable business venture. And this dream, I think if we polled everybody, we would probably get a majority. If you ask what the American dream was, it's the house with the white picket fence and the 2.5 kids and the dog. And so this is that story, and this is a story of a single Black mother trying to make it and trying to do better for her family, and have a better school experience for her children. And so I wanted to kind of, we want to segue into that and the importance of what it means for ownership, and I think everybody should know, especially for our out-of-town guests, that the East is some of the lowest portions of the city, and it is. I wanted to compare it to a couple other neighborhoods, and they talk about, I think, some of these neighborhoods like Pontchartrain Park and Gentilly and Pontilly, but also Lakeview, because Lakeview and the East were both white at the beginning, and the East became more and more Black as the economic kind of underpinnings of that area started to shift and change. But Lakeview never changed. And after Katrina, Lakeview received a whole lot more money per house based on the property value, which included the dirt, which was the completely the wrong calculation. To compare it to houses in Pontchartrain Park, which were built by the same developer and built by the same builder and using the same floor plans, using the same in the same elevations, because the sort of the land is the same there. There's just a big park that separates those two places. And if you think about the East, and if the East were as white as Lakeview, and Katrina had happened to that East, as opposed to the East that it did sort of hit, I think there'd be a different story about the East. And I think for me personally, driving through the East, when I first came to New Orleans, and was living in Mississippi and commuting back and forth, the East to me was the kind of destruction of this mall, of the movie theater. It was a wasteland in my eyes, because I was driving by at 60 miles an hour and not giving it more thought than that. And I feel a little embarrassed about that. But seeing the East in the context of Ivory May and how she was trying to sort of live that American dream after, the tragedy of her first husband, and just, and trying to kind of live a life outside of the city that was becoming harder and harder to live in. And so ownership and home ownership and trying to kind of move to the suburbs where the schools were better and all of those things, I think play a major kind of role in not only this story and not only this city, but sort of most of our cities, because the story is similar. Melissa?
And on page 88 of the book, Sarah writes, there are more paved roads than walkways. Certain parts of the East were best driven through. And that just, that imagery, right, communicates such a feeling. And when you get up close to it, you can't help but kind of dissect, what's the driving fear behind those kind of decisions? Why is that part of New Orleans been developed in a way that suppresses a sense of community rather than inspires to keep it and to grow it?
Well, and to add to that, I mean, it's obviously been discussed for years, but recently in the news is the removal of the Claiborne Overpass, and bringing what then devastated, longstanding Black communities by taking away, people passing through the business corridor and everything else, the beautiful trees. Was in reading articles about it, was curious. I mean, there's a lot of concern that removing the overpass would lead to further gentrification of that area. I'm curious to hear what y'all think about that. And I mean, not to poo-poo the idea entirely, but just wondering if you, like, what everyone else thinks about that.
I have thoughts, but I'm talking a lot.
We love your thoughts. So
I'll go. I think that this is where the reliance on the free market is problematic, right? Because what they will do, which is how it was built in the first place, is that, and I was listening to someone talk about this before, about the overpass and just about the interstate highway system in general, is that, they sent engineers built this, right? And so they sent these engineers out, and the basic economic principle was find the cheapest land that you can, find the least represented land that you can, because they're not going to fight you, right? Like they did fight the French, like the French Quarter. They did fight that, right? There were two highways slated for New Orleans. One that went along the French Quarter, that would have, blown through, not chartered, what's the street along where Cafe Du Monde is. So it would have gone through
Decatur.
Decatur. I don't know why I had a brain fart. I haven't been down there in a year, probably. And so there was going to be a big freeway, a big elevated freeway right along Decatur, right along the river, right where Harrah's is, right at the kind of foot of canal. That then there was a tunnel under there also. And then there was going to be the elevated over Claiborne. So both of those were planned, right? Robert Moses had his hand in both of those. There was a fight, which was the kind of preservation, kind of the early inklings of what the modern preservation movement is today, to stop the French Quarter elevated freeway, and they won. But the Claiborne freeway, the I-10 elevated, still was built. I'll find some articles. There's a really great article that's been kind of circulating around by Richard Campanella about Claiborne, and about how so many businesses, and you look at the historic photos of Claiborne Avenue and you just don't believe how beautiful it was. I mean, St. Charles had nothing on Claiborne Avenue. The oak trees were bigger. There were more oak trees. And it destroyed the Treme, the neighborhood that it sort of cut through. So all of that history lesson. I think that you can do this, but it's about land control, right? All of this is about land control. Everything that we talk about, from affordable housing to segregation to all of this, is about control and power and land. And what you do is you make sure that land doesn't get gobbled up by speculating developers from all over the place. You just don't allow it to happen. And there are ways to do that. And we can do that as a city, and we'll probably have to fight in court, and we'll probably have to go to the Supreme Court. And so we probably need to make sure the Supreme Court's a little bit more, the right way. But it can be done. And this is going to take decades anyway. I know a lot of people don't want it to see happen, who are probably more affected by it than I ever would be. But I would like to see it happen. The traffic count is that everyone uses that for local traffic. And so that Claiborne Avenue is big enough, it's wide enough to service that local traffic, and taking all of the sort of regional and kind of the industrial shipping traffic and keeping it out of the elevated and keeping it out of there will not be affected at all. It can all go out to 610 and then get going east or west. But it's about land control, and it's about making sure that we do an appropriate sort of model of who benefits from this, right? And I think it could be a reparations model that that becomes a real example to sort of point to and lean on.
I want to add to what Mike is saying in terms of one of the things we can do at places like TEP or in any of our businesses in which we work, is to also disrupt the narrative. I know with a lot of the neighborhoods that I've worked in who have these kind of issues that are going on, whether it be my hometown, the freeway went through the barrio. So it's like different where the land is cheapest, but it's sold as we're going to bring modern something or not to you all. And if you've been disenfranchised for so long and you have a developer coming to your house and saying, this is modern, this is something that's beneficial for you, that's really hard to push back on. So our jobs also are to continue to educate and to disrupt that narrative on the ground. Like, what is modern and what is good? And what's going to be beneficial long-term? And what's sustainable? And so messing up what you know now, a lot of people don't want that because they're used to it. But being able to say, okay, if we take our time and think about this and where it came from and where we can slow down and go forward. That's what our roles are right here. And that's what we're hoping to do at the TEP Center too. Because I mean, we're in St. Cloud, which is a artery, a major artery of the city. I mean, obviously there's not an overpass, but would it be possible to bring the streetcar down to us? I mean, how do we connect these transportation arteries that are beneficial to places that are kind of on the edges without disrupting, taking up a whole entire neighborhood like they did with I-10? So we're taking little pieces here at the TEP Center in these little conversations, but you all are doing the real work. And then we have to read what you all do, and we support you, and then we do it here on the ground too.
I think that's absolutely, huge. And it's something that we all want to, I think, learn more about and be participants with. Sarah also writes on page 88, I was just looking at it, landscape communicates a feeling. Walking, you can grab onto the texture of the place and get up close to the human beings who make it, but driving makes it distant and it grows fear. So with the TEP Center, it's communicating clearly the texture of the place, right? And it is propelling forward the human beings that are fighting for social justice. And it is dispelling kind of those fears and those myths around what makes us afraid.
I read someplace initially about the Claiborne Bridge and how they took the land basically from people who and then displaced them. I was more than upset as I read it because I just thought it was unfair, unjust, and so forth. But now I think I'm hearing what you say, and I could be completely wrong, that they're going to get rid of that and reestablish that neighborhood.
So there was a study probably about 7 or 8 years ago about taking down the Claiborne Elevated from the Crescent City connection to Elysian Fields, I think. And that study was done, and that was where the one I quoted that when I said the local traffic was it was the only traffic that's on that elevated. It's only local people driving from one place to another. I take it to go to my soccer games every Monday night instead of surface roads, and I could probably take the surface traffic and get there actually in the same amount of time. And so then that sat on a shelf somewhere. I'm sure if there was a real infrastructure bill in the last administration, it might have been in there somewhere, but I don't think there ever was a real infrastructure bill. But now there's a real infrastructure bill. And just to kind of give you a little bit of my nerdy inside political baseball, our local representative, our local congressman, former Congressman Cedric Richmond, is now within the sort of real inner circle at the White House. And so I have no doubt that connection and the connection to the fact that everyone is talking about taking down the Claiborne Bridge and the infrastructure bill have everything to do with each other. And so because Biden mentioned it in a speech the other day about how racism is built into our built environment, and mentioned the elevated specifically. And so there is more and more sort of talk about taking that down. I think that study probably really only lightly touched upon the kind of social and social collateral damage of putting it up. And I'm not sure how much they talk about taking it down and what that would mean. For those that aren't here, the under the underpass has become a cultural sort of node. It is a place where people congregate and where culture happens all the time. The most iconic, I would say, is the Mardi Gras Indians, but and that would be the downtown Indians, and the uptown Indians would be on another street, but the downtown Indians all meet under there. And so it is complex to sort of say we're trying to make a wrong right when folks have already sort of taken over and have decided that this is what they're going to sort of make their culture, and then to sort of take it away, right? And so I think there is definitely more conversation around that's necessary. It's just not something that you can just erase and everything is made better. And I think that's, I think when we do these things, it's all in the name of progress, like Melissa was talking about. It's all in the name of efficiency and all of these really terrible words that don't mean anything at the end of the day. And we are slowly, I think, coming to the realization that like all of this stuff is in service and a servant to people making more money, and not us, but other people. And that's something we have to kind of grapple with and really understand. Kim?
It seems to me with nobody in taking into consideration either, with no regard for people as this is happening. I'm sorry, Kim, excuse me.
No worries. If you don't involve the community in consultation going forward, you're perpetuating exactly what happened when it was constructed. So whatever discussions happen, they have to be, everyone has to be brought into it, and going forward, it has to be a decision that everyone had to say in, and the solution too.
I'm going to stop talking. I think we can segue into our last topic for the day, and it's back to let's go back to the Yellow House. Let me give a little bit of geography and geology for everyone. So Chef Mentor, the road that everyone that they live off of, is really, here we call it Chef or Chef Highway. No, I don't really know a lot of people that sort of use Chef Mentor, which I love is called Little Liar. It translates to Little Liar, but Chef Mentor is on a ridge. And so the geology of New Orleans is really developed by the river. If you see behind me, this is a perfect example. This is the Mississippi River, a little further north in Mississippi, in like Greenville, Mississippi, but it did this all the way down to the Gulf Coast. These are all the different courses over a 300-year history of the river. And so over that time, as the river kind of moves around, it dumps sediment, right? I currently, the river is 2 blocks that way from me, and we're on high ground, right? So in a deltaic, in a delta, the environment, the land closest to the river is the high ground, and further away is the low ground. Usually it's the other way around, right? Rivers are in valleys. That's why water is in the valley. But we're different. So as the river kind of flowed around and did all these courses, it built up sediment and it built up ridges. And so there are ridges all over the city, and the geography of the city is sort of made of these ridges. And so you'll hear terms like the Esplanade Ridge, which is where Esplanade Avenue is. That's high ground. The Metairie Ridge, which leads out to Metairie from Esplanade, or from actually Bayou Road. And then Chef Mentor is on a ridge. And Chef Mentor is part of the Old Spanish Trail, which led east from New Orleans to what they called West Florida, to Mississippi, Biloxi, those places, which were founded a little bit earlier than New Orleans. But that ridge is really a low ridge in the grand scheme of ridges in the city. And so the east, the ridge is the highest ground in that sort of geographic area. And it's a really, really big geographic area. And we read about Betsy and the flood of Betsy and being able to just get out. But Katrina was much, much bigger, much, much deeper, much, much more unforgiving. And if you think about the East in the context of the geography of the place, the East was really low marshland, and we drained it. We dug more and more canals, more and more drainage canals, and dried out and tried to build suburban houses on them. And so there is this other aspect of vulnerability, the vulnerability of a place that's low lying, that drains poorly in the midst of our global climate change conversation. And so we wanted to talk more about water and how the threat of water is all around us, but especially in places like the East. And now I'll stop talking.
Before we started this session, you said that there'd been a week of rain. Has there been a flooding like the past week?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know specifically what happened, what's happened in the East, but I know that plenty places can't handle that kind of rain. We had probably 6 to 8 inches, maybe 10 inches in the city, and luckily it happened over the course of 5 days, but these were 5 days of these kind of torrential storms. I know I saw Tremaine and Leona on Wednesday, and everyone was talking about how Tuesday felt like it was a hurricane. Mm-hmm. And we know that lift boat accident happened out off the coast on Tuesday night. I'm not sure about any kind of bad flooding, but like sometimes we get these storms where it rains like 9 inches in a few hours, which we had a couple years ago, and that will flood houses, that will flood neighborhoods, and our drainage is really bad. After that, there were 2 really bad rainstorms. There was one in Baton Rouge in 16, there was one in New Orleans in 17, and then another one I think in 19. And we pulled the Sewer and Water Board pulled a vehicle, a Ford Mustang, out of one of the drainage pipes.
Tom has a question.
Tom?
Mike, I think one other thing you have to add about the geography of New Orleans is the fact that besides these ridges, we decided to go in and build a bunch of not canals, but levees. Mm-hmm. And the levees were there so that they could then drain the swamp, and that create the land of which New Orleans East and a lot of other places, Metairie as well, developed. But what happened, of course, is the land, as you pull the water out, would just sink and sink and sink. And that's why you got 30 feet below sea level in some places, and other high ground was maybe 6-8 feet above, closer to the river. But the levees are critical to understanding how this all happened. And the idea of coming in and building a levee that would then allow you to develop all this land was part of what New Orleans East was all about, and the whole city for that matter. But drainage is clearly a key to the whole fear of water in the city.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, that's an integral part of the canals. I didn't I didn't talk about that.
Well, and then the failure of those levees during Katrina also.
56 individual failures, and I forgot how many miles of still private levee that make up the levee system. So privately managed, privately repaired, privately maintained levees. And so if you think about how those decisions get made, it's a little scary that it's not a publicly maintained and publicly managed system. Now, the other parts of it were publicly maintained and publicly managed, and they still failed. So no one's doing great. No one's got a great track record. So hopefully we've learned our lesson. But we can't kind of levee and canal and pump our way out of vulnerability.
Not with oceans rising.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a great metaphor for racism too. Seriously, I mean, I'm not being simplistic. I think it's wonderful because we keep doing that.
Yeah, there's a poem, and the line from the poem that's really important is that racism is not the shark, it's the water. And it just allows sharks to exist. And so the sharks we see are the overt, bigoted events and people, the George Wallaces, the past president, those kind of people. But it's the water that actually allows those folks to survive and really is what is racism and not. And I think that's a hard thing for folks to kind of get their heads around because they see, the screaming crowd that were yelling at Leona, Gale, and Tessie as that's racism. And I'm not racist. I'm not that, right? But yeah, it's definitely the water.
Can I say one thing? Because I'm just looking at time, and not that we're leaving anytime soon, but I wanted to tie something to your first quote from Yellow Book and McDonough Day and the TEP Center and moving forward. So you all hopefully will go to the TEP Center website or the Leona Tate Foundation website and just let us know that you're here and that we can continue to keep you updated of information. Because one of the things, the building is unfortunately been delayed because of Mother Nature, and water and Mother Nature will always win. So we've been delayed a little bit in terms of when we're going to be opening. But May 7th, we are going to celebrate the protest of Black families in New Orleans in 1954. And there's a few reasons for that. One, on its face, celebrating one of the first civil rights activities in New Orleans. But that we are reclaiming the name of McDonough 19 in the name of these three women. So we're renaming it, so it's Reclaiming Day. But back to the quote that came from the Yellow Book of how people think about New Orleans as this wonderfully joyous place, which we are, but there's some other things that we need to talk about too. And May 7th is pretty close to the last weekend of Jazz Fest. So we're really looking to hopefully keep people who are coming to New Orleans and also educate that and get them over to the East. And that there's activity there. So it really is an opportunity in terms of our calendar, in terms of the story, in terms of talking about the Yellow Book with these folks. What I was talking about modernism earlier. Think about young kids today and saying, this woman had this house. And they would ask, okay, was it 4 bedrooms? Was it 3 baths? I mean, this is ownership. This is taking control of the land that you have. It doesn't have to be bright and shiny, but making something viable of it, and that it's anchored in the city. And that's where we're able to kind of talk about this book, but be able to talk to our visitors when they come every May and send people each year back and forth and having the same conversations. I mean, you all know of people who come to Jazz Fest every year. And that's I have friends for family reunions are at Jazz Fest. And so really marking that opportunity. and kicking off kind of our summer programming too. So keep that in mind.
Just a couple thoughts as you were as we were touching on like the water and in the book. One of the things I really like the way obviously when she writes about the water, she talks about just the site of the house, the little ditch where the brothers go get crawfish and things like that. She talks about the site and the placement of it, and like I said, and that background, the history of being kind of swamp, precarious spot. And anecdotally, one of my there was a pamphlet one of the developers wanted to build in the 60s. Was one of them was called Orlandia, like it was like the another city of lakes in that area. And I think Betsy kind of was one of the points that kind of stopped. But from both the living with it, just putting the boards over the ditch for the cars and things like that, going into the obviously then the experience of Betsy and the natural and human impacts of everything else that went on. One of the other things when she mentioned one of the newspaper articles about the development of New Orleans East, and they talk about like one of the lines used, like the city within a city, which I was curious. It sounded to me like if that's like suburbanization, like, hey, white people come move, here, you can be in the city without the city problems, that develops. So I was really curious to see some of those ads that she mentioned in there. But just, tying that, water, the whole racism kind of built into some of that, development as well. But she just does such a good job of weaving the personal stories while also building up the structure of where she is, where you are, like the building that house, and then when rooms get added, as the family gets added, it's just very beautifully done. Just on the artistic side, and it's just interesting, because like to hear, like I said, when she talks about some uncles and when they have some of these things, that it's just, it's the way of talking is just so much like I could hear, my own relatives, like just certain phrases jumped out of the way. I'm like, oh, it's exactly what, I don't hear many people use this term and that, or, so, I definitely like that personal side. That's also different, very different from, my slice of suburban New Orleans grow up.
Thanks, Stephen. I want to kind of play a little bit of rhetorical analysis on that quote that I have, because I've been thinking about this a lot. I've been thinking, about the dysfunctional term that she uses, right? And how loaded that term can be in any context of when you're talking about kind of a dysfunctional place. I know that in the years following Katrina, when I was sort of in Mississippi and in New Orleans, and then I would go home to Texas or would visit family in Chicago or in Texas, and I would find myself saying, oh, things work here, right? Like I can go to the grocery store, or the lights work on the street, the stoplight works, those sort of things. And it can be a really easy kind of pitfall to get into, or a trap to get into. Because what is it about functionality that's important when it comes to what she's talking about with dysfunctional city, right? And I'm not critiquing Sarah Broom's sort of statement, but I'm sort of trying to kind of pull this idea of dysfunctionality out and talk about it a little bit when we talk about our cities and we talk about like everything, right? And talk about why are we saying this is dysfunctional? And sometimes we often say things are dysfunctional because they're not making money. They're not sort of producing. They're not efficient. And and there's something, I had a conversation, I made my first business trip last week to Utica, Mississippi, which is right outside of Jackson. And I had a really great meeting and a really great conversation. Lydia, I should talk to you about these folks. And we were talking about me growing up in El Paso with my sister. And I brought up this this very kind of typical icon of our youth when we would go visit our grandfather in Juarez, and it was these clay characters that were sort of and sometimes made of glass of a man sort of taking a nap, kind of his arms wrapped around his knees and his sombrero over his head, and and that image is kind of very kind of, you know, it's ubiquitous, at least in our youth, right? And it was actually a positive image, but it turned, in our lifetime, has turned into a negative image about laziness and about unproductiveness. And so I may be kind of getting a little bit too broad for everyone, but what I'm trying to get to is that, like, we are constantly comparing our city, our neighborhood, our houses, all of these things in terms of functionality, dysfunctionality, efficiency, profitability, all of these things. And I'm not so sure that's really useful. It's very important. And I don't know if it's getting us to a better place. And I just wanted to throw that out there, if that made if that resonated, or if this is just the mad ramblings of a crazy person.
No, I think that's a definite, what you're saying makes a lot of sense, Mike. And I wonder if she wasn't more referring to the fact that, you know, everyone thinks of New Orleans as, okay, this is where you have a good time, and this is where we party, and this is where, you know, all of this fun stuff is happening. So it's very easy to overlook. It's very easy to gloss over that, you know, undercurrent that is dysfunctional in our city, because we just always look like we're great and having a great time and partying all the time. So I'm wondering if that's more what she's referring to, because I agree with you. Efficiency and all of these, we can put a grocery store here and here, we could do all of these things to where, and put in these overpasses so that we're more efficient. That's a different dysfunctionality that I don't think is, I think I agree with you, is not always better.
I think that part of the dysfunctional or just dysfunctionality, you know, is something that's hidden, right? Just like with racism, it's not something that's very, you know, out. No, I mean, some of it is and some of it isn't. But I think part of having these, especially like New Orleans East, it's not someplace that is seen regularly. So when we have, you know, when you have visitors and tourists coming to New Orleans, they're not going there. They're seeing the other places in New Orleans and missing this bigger picture of what New Orleans really is. And for me, I love New Orleans, and I rarely go to the French Quarter, which is, I mean, it's great and it's beautiful, but the richness is not there. The richness is in the people, and getting to meet so many of Mike's colleagues and friends, and just, you know, there's so much more to New Orleans than by definition of the party town.
I think also in that statement is it's implied, but it's really lightly implied, is that and there's probably more context around the sentence than what I've pulled out, but you know, the folks, especially now in the East, and Tremaine, you live in the East, my sister's daughter, my niece, lives in the East, and the transformation of the population after post-Katrina in the East, the kind of housing shortages, the challenges that have happened there, the lack of services that have happened in the East. I think she's sort of making a comment about that, but also the industry that up until COVID that was sort of carrying the city had been the tourism industry. And the tourism industry is carried on the backs of minimal and minimum wage workers that are increasingly living in the East and other kind of outlying neighborhoods without services, without bus routes, without proper transportation, without any of these things. And that I think that's the dysfunction she's sort of getting to. And I have become just more sensitive and much more concerned about the economic goals of anywhere in a place like New Orleans, and what is it that we chew up and crush, and who is it that we chew up and crush to get to those goals. And unfortunately, there's been very little change in 400 years.
What does everyone think about the proposed development for the Six Flags? I'm just thinking of, just popped into my head because it was also relatively recently in the news. And so just wondering what everyone's thoughts are about that. Mike, are you like, what?
I don't want to.
Bread in circuses.
I'm sorry, Daddy.
It's just kind of more bread in circuses. It's not like a long-term, real jobs, real contribution to the economy, lifting up everybody. It's for the tourists again.
But to earlier points, do you think it will then bring that traffic, bring people to the East, instead of it just being something that people pass through?
So just to give, go ahead, Melissa.
I wasn't going to say much about it, except I guess two things. One, I think there isn't enough subsidy available and in place to do anything really meaningful, except to cater to tourists, which if you look at precedent studies of that, shows that it doesn't benefit a community. So I can only presume that would be the case. That's all I'm going to say.
For a little context, everybody, there's an abandoned Six Flags amusement park in the East, and there had been a few attempts to try and redevelop it. The city put out an RFP a few months ago. There are 3, I think, submissions, right, Sarah? One is with our fearless former quarterback, who's partnered with a company out of Colorado that builds data centers. And they are all venturing into uncharted waters with what they're proposing, and they're the front runner. The other one is an outlet mall, I believe, and then I forgot what the third one was. I'll weigh in because this is my world.
I think it's a hotel, Mike.
Yeah. I think, again, and this is connected to what I was saying earlier and what we've been talking about, sort of this idea of jobs and this idea of economy and the idea of like, what is it that we are, what is it that we produce? What is it that we can make? And I don't think that site is strategic for anything other than possibly amusement park. And the reason why it was an amusement park there is because the land was cheap. Right? Like if we understand the history from this book, about the land there, and the kind of collapse of New Orleans East Inc. and the ability to get a bunch of land really cheap, because you need a lot of land to build an amusement park. I mean, you got a lot of land to build a roller coaster. So I just don't think it's a strategic location for anything. There is no transportation whatsoever out there. And we all know that our bus, our RTA is really kind of challenged in many other ways, and people still kind of use the streetcar as like transportation to work, which is the most preposterous thing ever to think. And I recently had the chance to work with some young men on Leona's project, in kind of a construction experience, kind of few days, and a few of these kids came from the West Bank and come from other places in the East. They're getting up at 4 a.m. to get on a bus to meet me at 7 and meet me at 8. And so like, I just don't see how that site is strategic in any way. I would much rather see us take that site down in an ecological sort of responsible way, make Six Flags pay for it. I think that there is so much of the kind of, there's such a microcosm of a big corporation making its money, walking away, and then leaving it for the community to have to deal with the consequence of it. And if there's anything, it's an ecological park. It's a place that we can start to really understand the kind of ecology of that region, of our region. I don't see it anywhere else, and I just don't see it making money.
Service, but then support for down here, I added that.
Is that?
Let me see if I can put it in now.
Somebody, Jermaine. Yeah, I just don't see a viable real estate development happening there that does anything important. I mean, the one that Drew Brees is sponsoring is sort of like a business park and innovation center, and there's a lot of buzzwords, but like I'm not really sure what it is. And that's the real sort of danger of real estate development, is that you can kind of throw out a lot of words, and you can throw a lot of buzzy things and get people really excited and get a lot of subsidy, and then you make your bank, and then you move along, and somebody else is left holding the bag of the development. Walmart does that everywhere. You see this in kind of the big empty box stores all over the place, where owners build these buildings for things like Walmart, like Lowe's, like the Lowe's in the East on Bullard. And you sign this lease, they get out of it, but you can't let anybody else rent the space. So you just have this big empty warehouse for decades, right? And so I just fear that whatever comes of it is going to be a real challenged project to begin with. And we don't have an underlying industry that demands that space, right? Like real estate development is not an economic driver. It is not economic development. It is the product of a good economic sort of environment that is requiring space. And don't let anyone else tell you that. And somebody's going to find this recording and like get me in trouble, but that's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. Hi, Kim, you're on mute.
I just like Google Map that site, and it's like there's nothing around it, and I don't think it's gonna spark hotel or restaurant or commercial activity around there. So you can have a lot of people taking some form of transportation there, back and forth. So I'm not sure it would really be a generator for the area. just maybe create like a lot of fumes.
I think there's a neighborhood back there too that's kind of lost because of the, you know, I don't know if the neighborhood was before the Six Flags or after, but if you don't go back there, you don't realize, or know someone, you don't realize that there's a whole subdivision back there.
That's right.
Like if it's going to lift up the area in some aspect, that might be something to consider, but it is quite kind of remote, and I don't know, I'd have to look at the topo map for it and the water level, because I don't know if you'd be getting a lot of hotel development there, and I don't know if you'd want to have like a lot more permeable surfaces there, because that's going to add to your water problems.
So here is this is the Six Flags site at Google, on Google Earth. This is I-10 and really the edge, the edge of the east here. Kathleen, this is the neighborhood you're talking about, right? But as you sort of pan out, you start to see that this is really the kind of marsh and Bayou Sauvage region. This is Chef Ventura right here. Runs over here. Wilson is somewhere over here. But I just it's hard to imagine something there because there's no infrastructure there to support it, right? This was built, you see this is the parking lot, right? Which is bigger than the park itself. And so this was built for people to arrive by car. And it is I think a really hard thing to kind of figure out for RTA on how to get bus routes here in real time. And I'm just not a believer that this is something that will come to pass as a real success story. And I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong, right? For the sake of the neighborhood, for the sake of the city, I hope I'm wrong about it.
Well, and things like outlet malls are just so overplayed. I mean, and I'm sure the traffic counts that they're looking at are not just from New Orleans, but coming in from the east as well, from over the bridge. I remember there was a talk, this was years ago, about putting an IKEA there. And at least that's a destination, and that's kind of where they were doing the traffic counts again. When they're looking at the data center, Mike or anybody else, are they looking at numbers to come in just for workers? Or are they going to create like a destination where they'll create that infrastructure within that development?
No, it's not. They're not even.
Data center.
Yeah, they're not proposing it to say data center.
Oh, okay.
They're data center developers though, and they're proposing a innovation. Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, obviously we have to see more. We have to see what they're proposing and what they're doing. But I mean, like real estate is all about the tenant, right? Like the real estate developers aren't doing anything. Like we're not doing anything. The TEP Center, the Leona Tate Foundation for Change, the People's Institute will be the tenants in this TEP Center project. They're the ones who are doing the work. They're the ones who are doing the important stuff, not the real estate developers. And I think that is often always sort of lost in these discussions about the next new shiny building that somebody's going to build.
For the people on the call who live in the East, what are the conversations? And, in your neighborhoods? What do people about that specifically, about that development? I mean, are there strong opinions one way or the other?
Tremaine, you're on mute.
And I'm just about to get started talking away. The conversations are just nothing seems like it's a good the best solution. It's just kind of everything is band-aiding. So I you know,
I don't.
it's frustrating.
I don't live in the East, but I work with people who live in the East, and they're really not talking about it. It's more like a, well, we'll see.
Right.
Okay. Is there a desire for what it could be? I mean, is that talked about, or is it just, well, we'll see what happens?
Right now, it's like, well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring that topic up tomorrow and see what happens. But, you know, right now it's like, yeah, well, we'll see. You know, everything is still just talked about, you know, but, you know, the reason I know that there is a neighborhood there is because I have a coworker who lives in that neighborhood. So, you know, and she remembers it well, you know, going to Jazz Fest. Her kids could go right there, you know. And I remember it well, driving my kids there, but it was from the West Bank. It was an all-day affair. We were leaving early and coming back late, you know. But, you know, I think there so many things has happened or not happened in the East that they're like, we'll see.
And then when it was, I mean, when it was in its kind of heyday, I think I attended Jazzland probably 1.5 times.
I attended more than you.
Right.
Because I think we brought the youth group more than one time.
Yeah. So, I mean, it really didn't hold in any attention at that point.
Mm-hmm. I think it was the age for certain ages. Yeah.
And then, so I don't live, I'm right off Morrison, but my husband moved up closer to the city because his first home was bought in Michoud, which is literally right next to it. So, yeah. And so he was like, I need to get closer.
I think there's one thing that Kim touched upon when we were talking about the elevated over Claiborne, is that it sort of feels pretty obvious that there's been a lackluster attempt at community engagement and community input on what happens here on this site, and that I think is kind of typical of places, but you would hope that a place like New Orleans would do better. Following the last, 15 years, 16 years of post-Katrina kind of rebuilding, redevelopment. And there are some mechanisms in place for community input, but they are often symbolic and they often kind of check boxes when it comes to like a zoning change. And then you have to have a community meeting to explain to the neighborhood what you're doing. And those can take any kind of shape or form. And often, the architects here in the room often get put up to the community by the developer, or worse, they send their lawyer. So they send somebody in a 3-piece suit out there to a neighborhood and they're like, hey, I don't know. And then they said, yeah, we had this meeting and we move on. And I wish that process had more teeth. It had more input from staff that were sort of attending these things, and that we just had a different way of going about and doing this. And I'm a developer, and so like anytime there's more like restrictions and barriers and stuff like that, that costs more money, and we don't like that. But as someone who's just a citizen in this neighborhood, I think that like we can't continue to sort of leave it up to the folks in power to make all of the decisions, because they're going to make the decisions that they want to make. This is a real stretch. I heard a guy on the radio talking about food, and he was talking about like fast food, and he said, think about this. Corporations are making all the decisions about what goes inside your body, and you're allowing them to make those decisions. It's the same thing when it comes to like the real estate development. It comes to all of this stuff where power sort of reigns supreme. We just kind of like, oh, well, they're going to make the decision for us, and that decision is going to be based on money. And so, like, we're going to continue to do this. We've seen what these decisions have led to at the granular level and at the larger scale, and what it does to people and what it does to mostly people of color, and in our city, Black people. And we have to think, do we want that? Are we going to continue to do that? We're going to wait for the next Katrina, which is coming, you know? I've talked way too much today.
The only last thing that I just wanted to say, and it picks up on my take and what I said at our last meeting, and this being epic or Homeric, right? It felt like to me the story of the Iliad, right? The story that was set during the Trojan War and the 10-year siege of the city of Troy, right? And I came to that because Sarah wrote about her bad eyesight and the need for glasses. And she talked about taking off the glasses so she could be blind at will. And that essentially is Homer, right? Homer was the presumed author of the Iliad and the Odyssey. He was blind. And that's Sarah. So that they're both blind sages telling the story of devastation and loss. And in book 1 of the Odyssey, after the main character, is it Aeneas? After seeing his city destroyed, he leaves Troy, right, with his family. And there are a few that survived the war, and they wash up on the shores of Africa. And their people built a temple where they've taken the stories of Troy and they've embossed it into the walls of the temple. And he saw it for the first time. He saw the stories of his people and where he lived, and it broke him, and he collapsed in tears. And he said, these are the stories of tears. So both she and Homer, right? So both Sarah and Homer tell these epic stories of destruction of a city and a displacement of a people. And I'm just struck by the huge sense of responsibility that it takes to hold stories of a city and hold stories of your family, and to then do something with it. And I am tying it back to Miss Leona. And I wanted to know, you know, how did you find the confidence and the courage and the endurance to hold these stories and to be a sage and to tell, you know, your story, which is such a thing of both tears and of beauty?
It took a long time for me to do that. I didn't talk about it for oh Lord, over 20 something years. I just refused to talk about it. And it was very emotional when I first started talking about it. But I think I have a crutch now. I know how to kind of like hold it all in. But it hasn't been easy. I'm gonna be honest with you. It hasn't been easy. And today just brought back memories. It just what could have been. You know, we really had it smooth, and I thank God that we were so young that we didn't understand what was going on. But it really could have been a dangerous situation.
Thank you for sharing with us, Miss Leona. I appreciate it a great deal.
You're welcome.
Well, it is 8 o'clock in the evening in Central Time. And I want to thank everybody for coming out. This has been a really great discussion. I want to take a quick poll. does May 25th, which is a Tuesday, sound like enough time to read the rest of the book? Or
That Memorial Day.
it's the weekend, it's the Tuesday before Memorial Day weekend.
I'm out of town.
You're out of town on the 25th?
Yeah.
You're a jet setter, Leona. So the 17th is tax day. And so the 18th is the day after tax day, which is about a month from now. I don't know if that is too close for slow readers like me, or we go June 1st. Any thoughts?
I think June 1st.
Okay. So it's June 1st.
We can finish it during Memorial Day weekend on our vacations, right?
There you go.
There you go.
There you go. And everybody knows that the first and this session will be on our YouTube page. We have a YouTube page now, NOAF YouTube page. It has one video on it. I'm going to try and get last year's book club on it. But you can just go to YouTube and Google New Orleans Architecture Foundation, and it should come up. And you can watch these or share them with friends who weren't able to make it but wanted to. And we will meet again. I will try to figure out constant contact and the emails and all of this stuff. This is really not my forte. I feel very inadequate when I'm trying to do this stuff. So anyway, we'll send out some invites, and we'll talk about the rest of this book. I think that the second half of this book will be a very really interesting discussion on the heels of this discussion. Yeah, that's all I would say. Anybody else have anything to say? Leona and Lydia and Tremaine, thank you again. And Kathleen, great to meet you. I'm sure we're going to meet in person. Melissa, thank you for co-hosting, and everyone, thank you for being here on this kind of emotional, special sort of
The roller coaster
of a day.
There we go.
Yeah. So
Mike and Melissa, thank you so much for moderating.
Thank you.
That was really well
Thank you,
done.
everybody. Thank you.
all right, everybody,
And Mike, you're
Appreciate
excellent
you guys.
storyteller.
go do your homework now.
All right.